Hello everyone, it is so good to see you. I've been playing games for as long as I can remember, and you want to know what one of my favorite feelings is? It's playing a game and somewhere during that playthrough, you realize to yourself, whoa, this is like one of my favorite games ever. This is in my top 5 now, or outright is my new favorite game. And you just savor that every moment you have with it while it lasts. Like, forget recency bias. If it invokes that genuine spark of joy, it's worth reveling in that. And maybe it's because I'm older now, but I just don't get that feeling much anymore. For me, I felt this happen so many times during the GameCube era. I personally view it as a formative generation, a console that really hammered into me that I love video games. A technological leap, a huge melting pot of experimental ideas, and most importantly, the first foray into 3D for certain classic titles. I only owned a Game Gear and Genesis, so Sonic Adventure 2 Battle was my first 3D Sonic. Metroid Prime happened to be my first Metroid. And then there was Fire Emblem. Pardon the long preamble, I just get nostalgic when I talk about the little cube. But that's what I want to cover at length today. This is the third Fire Emblem title that was released overseas, making it the 9th title in Japan. It is one of the rarest titles, having been locked to the GameCube for decades until it was released on the Switch 2 for owners of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. And I couldn't be happier to witness what is very much one of my favorite games ever become so much more widely available to everyone. I've done multiple retrospectives and lookbacks at GameCube titles on this channel. We tend to be very silly and spontaneous in those videos, but I do want to reel it back and make this one more down to earth, because I think it deserves that. And whether you've played this as much as I have, or will be entering the world of Tellius for the very first time, I do hope you enjoy it as we walk down this road together. This is Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Fire Emblem found success overseas with the Blazing Blade and Sacred Stones on the Game Boy Advance. This pushed Intelligent Systems to make the big leap to 3D despite the high development cost. This would be the first time that the series returned to home consoles since Threscia 776 on the Super Famicom. The team wanted to make something much more ambitious than ever before. Full 3D graphics, character models, a grander soundtrack, full motion video cutscenes with voice acting, a pretty big jump from just being sprites on the GBA. Senri Kita was the character designer and artist joining the dev team for the first time. Her previous works include multiple projects while at SNK, including Samurai Showdown, promotional art for Garo Mark of the Wolves, and Capcom vs SNK. She also did art for the cancelled Capcom Fighting All-Stars, where you can really see the similarities in structure and shading in the faces here. From character design to full-screen background art, they did it all and still does art for Fire Emblem even now, notably in Fire Emblem Heroes. You'll often find her drawing the same characters that she did 20 years ago. This was a time when localization took much longer and worldwide releases weren't a standard practice. But because of this, Intelligent Systems were able to take feedback on the Japanese audience's reaction and adjust the game for a Western release. Japan had normal, hard, and maniac difficulty options. But partly because of the response to the game's challenge, English releases reduced the difficulty. Now the game had a newly introduced easy mode along with normal and hard. In addition, hard was toned down, which is why a lot of players will tell you that this is certainly one of the easiest Fire Emblem titles in the series. And unlike the sequel to this game, the difficulty options were labeled correctly in translation. But thank goodness. This was also Nintendo Treehouse's most difficult challenges of localization at the time, requiring staff from Japan to fly in and check their work. The team wanted to preserve as much of the story's depth and tone as possible, despite their limitations on character space. They had the option to add text boxes, but they wanted to keep the pace brief and opted to match the amount of boxes present in the Japanese version. This may explain some awkward or rushed moments of dialogue, but for the vast majority of this title, I feel the narrative keeps a good pace as we follow our heroes. It's quite a feat when you consider that this game had a script almost as long as the original Animal Crossing. The origin of our main protagonist Ike goes back as far as a game called Fire Emblem Maiden of Darkness. Originally planned on the N64, the game was cancelled and very few remnants of it still remain. But in one of these salvaged sketches, we can see the prototype for the game's main character, named Ike. His name was eventually changed to Roy, and when Maiden of Darkness was fully cancelled, he was carried on to what would become the Binding Blade for the GBA. It wouldn't be until 3 games later that the name Ike would emerge once more. Many people will know Ike from Super Smash Bros. He just so happened to be the most recent protagonist by the time Brawl released on the Wii, and has been a part of the roster ever since, despite Path of Radiance becoming so elusive to play. But it was very well because of Smash that Ike would turn into perhaps the most popular Fire Emblem character in the series' history. So what is this game? What is it about this single strategy RPG that has so many fans saying that this may be the very best in the entire series, years after getting other greats like Fire Emblem Awakening or Three Houses? Can a game from 2005 still hold up this well 20 years later? This is gonna be a long one, Mercenaries. Let's move out. Compared to having a plethora of options in modern Fire Emblem games, this one will reel it back to a time where there wasn't such a thing as pairing up, gambits, or engaging. Like all titles, you command an army of blue units that wage war against the opposing red units. Each character has their own strengths, weaknesses, skills, weapons, what have you. Everyone has a defined class which determines what basic actions they are capable of. A warrior can use axes for strong strikes, but may be more inaccurate and slower. A mounted lance unit on horseback has great movement, and can use the rest of their movement after performing an action. A priest's job is primarily to heal other units, and they themselves cannot attack. There is a whole wealth of classes to explore, and it's key to include a variety in your army so that you have an ample amount of options to handle any situation. But you have to be careful. If any unit falls in battle, that's it. They are gone forever. Permadeath was alive and well in this era, so to speak. And that can be particularly painful in a game that places such a large emphasis on the story. Fire Emblem is a series that wants to engage the player with the characters and the setting. Interactions, lore, and ample amount of world building bookend each battle, building a bridge that contextually guides you from one fight to the next. It's like a storybook, just part of the reason why every game is divided into chapters. I think it was this game in particular that made me realize how much of a fan I am of visual novels. I consider Fire Emblem on the GBA to be my very first ever visual novel. It's exactly that format. It just so happened to have a bunch of fantasy chess happening between the storytelling. But this was not the GBA anymore. This was a console, and one that was much more powerful than the Super Famicom. The amounts of world and story that you can cram into this tiny little GameCube disc was vast in comparison, and I had high hopes for what I could possibly experience after playing a game like The Sacred Stones. As a kid, I wasn't super zeroed in on what was improved upon, what I didn't like from a critical standpoint, or any of that. But I remember enjoying nearly every single change made to the core gameplay itself. Mission objectives were almost all familiar to me. Seize a castle, route every enemy in a map, defend a space, all of those return. One new objective was arrive. You simply have to get any unit to a space and, well, arrive to clear a map. It doesn't even have to be Ike. You can really breeze through some of the chapters with this in mind. There's also Escape, which is fairly similar in concept, but now the map ends when Ike is the one to arrive at the designated point. But you do get a little bonus for allowing your other allies to escape off the map first. They're fairly similar in concept, and pretty much the only new objectives that weren't in the previous couple of titles. You'll discover some of the real differences as you acclimate yourself to the flow of battle. One of the first ones you might notice is Shove. Any unit that isn't mounted can shove another unit that they're adjacent to, as long as they are close in weight or heavier. This pushes them to a single space forward, as long as they can occupy the terrain they're being shoved onto. It's a fun utility, but in practice, it's a little niche and doesn't greatly affect battles a whole lot. There will definitely be moments where a single push can get an ally just close enough to fight an enemy, or you can use it to get a defenseless ally out of the way. But I wouldn't say that it's a core mechanic that dramatically changes up the game. There is a single chapter that places a great emphasis on shoving, specifically on enemies, as you try to keep the innocent priest alive as the villains uses them for shields. For as annoying as a chapter like this might be, the blending of story and game mechanics were very expertly accomplished and highlighted here. But I am glad that there's only one chapter like this. It's more about the context of the battle themselves that's new here. On one map, you might be trying to break prisoners out of jail as the game teaches you about stealing and lockpicking. Or you can just smash a door open. That feels very satisfying to do. You could also sneak around and turn this chapter into a stealth mission if you're crafty enough. In one map, it's ideal that you have a very dangerous enemy speak to a defenseless unit to have their followers retreat. Or you can wipe everybody on the map out if you want it, or if you can. In one stretch of a chapter, Ike is forced to carry and protect an unconscious unit, reducing his stats, so you'll need to be careful and protect him now. Other times, you might have to deal with an enemy telling you to eat rock as they hurl dirt clods and roll boulders down a hill. And that damn bridge chapter with the traps in it, everyone loves to hate that bridge. While Path of Radiance doesn't exactly introduce new objectives, its greater strength lies in the contextual scenarios of the battles themselves and how they seamlessly tie into the story surrounding it. There's not a single map in any chapter that was thoughtlessly put together. Gameplay and story are expertly woven together, making for a satisfying flow to the journey. During battle, Ike as the protagonist can also order and direct friendly units. Green units will continue to always do whatever they like, but a new yellow unit type is willing to take general commands from you. You can order them to a specific space or tell them to halt in place. Yellow allies will often be relatively strong units that can potentially take experience from your own army, so I often tell them to hang back or go to a specific place to defend in a bottleneck. It's a fun little feature, and it keeps you mindful about managing another set of units. But used even less than direct is the new order command. It's very much like direct, except on your own units, so if you choose to end a turn with blue units that you haven't moved yet, they will act automatically. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me though. I would rather command everyone myself. It does have its little uses, like targeting a spot and telling everyone to go there instead of commanding them one by one. Just don't expect the game to autoplay for you, especially in harder difficulties. Watching anyone let units move on their own when there's still enemies around actively hurts my micromanaging brain. Another new mechanic is the skill system, where many units can be assigned or start with a passive skill. But it might be more accurate to say that this is a reintroduction to skills. Sure, there were some class-based skills that units had after promoting in the Sacred Stones, but there were no special menus or proper descriptions for any of them. Now, it takes after what was formerly introduced in Genealogy of the Holy War. Units can employ skills with various effects to shift the tide. Adept gives you a chance to attack an extra time in battle. Wrath will increase your critical hit percentage when you're under half HP. Vantage allows you to attack first, even if an enemy starts a battle. That's just a few, and they've been slightly adjusted since Genealogy, but many of them make their return after being absent from the GBA titles. This, of course, introduced a wealth of all new skills too. Something else that was newly introduced. It's the biorhythm system. Have you heard of the biorhythm system before? If you didn't, there's a reason. So, in this game, everybody has this chart with a wavy line. Every turn, the fluctuating line will proceed forward a little bit on this graph. If the dot in the middle stays in the center, nothing happens. If halfway up, you get a bonus in hit and avoid of 5 each. If it's all the way up, you get another 5 for a total of 10 to hit and avoid. Conversely, this can go to -5 or -10 if your biorhythm goes down. Every character has a different pattern, and a character like Boyd will double the effects because of his skill Tempest. But honestly, it's not very important. You can go the entire game not looking at it, or even knowing what biorhythm even is, and you'll almost never feel the effects of it. There might be a time where an enemy biorhythm is up and yours is down. You'll wonder, wait, why does my hit rate seem so low right now? But that's such an uncommon occurrence for a pitiable amount of percentage, even more so when it's just going to slightly change by the next turn. I think I looked at my character's biorhythm twice in this entire playthrough to say, oh yeah, so that's why it's low, huh? Took the enemy out and went on with my day. That is just how negligible it is. Even on hard mode, it won't make much of a difference. There aren't too many important aspects to make note of in hard mode. There will be slightly more enemies with higher stats, you can access a few more skills and stat boosting items, and the amount of experience you gain will be a little less. One of the biggest differences in this mode is the inclusion of the Fog of War maps, where you have limited visibility. Easy and normal modes won't feature this, requiring you to change up your approach to battle. With that being said, there's a whopping 2 chapters that employ the Fog of War mechanic. As someone who doesn't particularly like having my vision impeded, I didn't really mind that there were only 2 maps like this, but then again, if there's only 2, what's the point? You almost might as well have just not have these present at all. There is one major change that happens in the final chapter on hard, but we'll have to get to that later. The bottom line is, there's not too much difference in the difficulty settings. If you're a veteran of the series, I would recommend that you start on hard, as this is considered one of the easiest Fire Emblem games. Otherwise, there's no shame in starting on an easier difficulty. This is an era where permadeath was not an option after all, so there's always that looming fear of losing one of your favorite units forever. By far, one of the most interesting changes from previous Fire Emblem titles is the addition of the base. Partway through each chapter, you'll find yourself at a camp where you can perform all sorts of tasks. You can equip and organize items between your characters and your convoy. In many ways, this feels like an evolution of the castle in Genealogy of the Holy War, where you can buy and sell items prior to a battle. Plus, you can also forge your own weapons for the first time ever. I'd like you to meet Daniel. Daniel will take your commission, make your request specifically to however you want, and craft exactly how you'd like it. You can even name it or change the color, all for a single price. This is just me, so please come to me with your commissions and we'll work together to make exactly what you want. Art has a crazy way of imitating real life. Or, I guess given the fact that I was a kid at the time, maybe it's the other way around. By performing certain objectives in every chapter, you can also earn bonus experience and use them here. If you have a unit that's struggling a little bit, maybe a little bonus EXP can help them out. Do be mindful that these experience points are not one-to-one, and you'll burn through them a lot faster in later levels. Genealogy had the arena in their castle system, which in a way was an experience gaining mechanic that was replaced with bonus EXP. You see quite a lot of inspiration taken from that game in general. All in all, if you're a fan of the Fire Emblem titles for the Game Boy Advance, this will feel the most familiar and comfortable to play. It adds layers of complexity that I feel those titles were lacking, and offers a decent balance of mechanics to keep track of. It's still just as satisfying to watch your favorite characters grow and take on waves of units single-handedly. Conversely, it's just as sad to see a character level up and earn like one useless stat. But that's just the roll of the dice and the name of the game. And while this might not be the most challenging title in the series, Path of Radiance opens up a world to make this simple band of mercenaries some of the greatest characters I have ever endeared myself to. Every single Fire Emblem title features protagonists that are tied to royalty. Whether you're Marth, the Prince of Altea, Sigurd, the scion of House Chalfie, maybe you're a princess in hiding like Celica, or you discover that you're actually the son of an emperor like Ulm. This might partially be why people have an attachment to Lyn. She's just an ordinary girl who speaks and acts more boldly than some noble. Oh, but then you learn at the same time as her that she's actually the heir to House Kylin. Of course! But the development team wanted to change things up for Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Instead of nobles being driven from their land or fighting for their country, you're a simple band of mercenaries trying to make a living. Ike is the son of Greil, a powerful warrior who serves as a commander as they live in the outskirts of Crimea. The first moments of the game convey how Ike is still learning to be a proper fighter. His sister Mist is also introduced, singing a song that reminds him of their mother who isn't present with the rest of us. It isn't long until we're introduced to the rest of our company. The hot-headed Boyd and collected Oscar join you on your first mission, and you also get to see their youngest brother, Rolf. Deputy Commander Titania joins you as well and carries a more professional knightly air about her. Riss, while a bit frail, is a priest that dutifully serves as the healer of our group. There's Gatri, the Iron Wall Knight of the group, who's looking to woo any lady willing to give him the time of day. Often alongside him is Shinon, who doesn't really want to put up with anything unless he's sticking an arrow in someone. Soren is the final member that you're introduced to, a wind mage and tactician. He's very curt and objective in all manners of things, often giving unpopular opinions based on facts and reasoning. This merry ragtag band were all brought in at some point by Ike's father, forming the Greil Mercenaries. It's a very humble life, living day to day, often clearing out bandits disturbing the local civilians. They've even gained some renown amongst them. There are some who think that they could be doing greater deeds than scaring away a pirate group or two, but many enjoy the simple lifestyle. We quickly see how Greil runs the company. He's got a firm hand and isn't afraid to speak his thoughts. Even when disappointed or caught by surprise, everything is handled calmly without raising his tone, something that comes across despite being only voiceless text. He'll ask others for their opinions on certain matters and manages the company very well. These traits, along with the obedience and loyalty that the rest of the mercenaries display, portrays Greil as a very dependable and competent leader. Ike often addresses him more as a superior than a father. As a trainee, we witness how he simply wants the approval not just from him, but from the others as well. Having the perspective of someone who has the least battle experience of the group is a unique take for a setting like this. Ike is not some prodigy or an important noble, he really is just a guy who's trying to do his best. Now more than ever, I know what it's like to be frugal and working just enough to get by. He's immediately a lot more relatable to me than every other protagonist in the Fire Emblem series up to that point, or even since. But the simple day-to-day lifestyle can't last forever, can it? After being away for days, Soren returns to the group to confirm something grim. Their homeland, Crimea, has been invaded by its neighboring country, Dayan. After being blinded by a sudden attack, the king and queen were killed, and Crimea's forces are doing all they can to resist. It doesn't seem to be going well, and the party is conflicted as to what they should do from here. Their plans involving the war take a drastic turn when they stumble upon Dayan soldiers on the road. After clearing them out, they discover what they were in pursuit of: a single woman who survived the attack. She introduces herself as Elincia, Princess of Crimea, which comes as a shock to the group, especially since there was apparently not ever any mention of the king and queen having children. She speaks of how Ashnard, the king of Dayan, slaughtered her family and people, and pleads for aid as she now has no one else to turn to. At first, the group wasn't sure how to process or even begin to believe her story, but repeated attacks from the Dayan army only serve as proof of her claims. Elincia, with all of her earnest love of her country, humbly asks the Greil mercenaries to help in any way that they can. This wraps him into the biggest job the group has ever been hired for. So yeah, by chapter 4, you've saved the princess. Now what? Fire Emblem Path of Radiance isn't about saving a damsel in distress per se. You already saved her, if not by accident, and now your real goal becomes escorting Elincia back to Crimea so that she can take her place on the throne. Easier said than done. There is a whole war that's broken out. How can a simple handful of mercenaries accomplish a task like this? They're going to need aid, smart strategizing, and above all else, become more knowledgeable about the vast world around them. The continent of Tellius consists of several ruling powers and groups of people. We begin in Crimea, shortly before the war-hungry region of Dayan invades and takes over. The largest country to the south of here, Benyon, possesses the most powerful military strength in the world. It's a theocracy dedicated to the goddess Ashura, and once had sovereignty over all but one nation in Tellius. These are only the territories ruled by the Bjork, or rather people who are most like you and I. There is one other race of people in Tellius, known as the Laguz. They bear the ability to take on the form of powerful animals. Gallia to the west is home of the Beast Laguz, who can change into cat and tiger-like forms. In the islands to the south, Phoenicis is where the Proud Hawk tribe lives, and east of them, their neighbors of Kilvis is where the Raven tribe lives. The Ravens, however, don't share a very friendly bond with either Bjork or Laguz, and are often seen as scheming and traitorous sky pirates. Finally, the land of Goldoa is the realm of the Dragon Laguz. They are a solemn and powerful tribe that have chosen to cut themselves away from the rest of Tellius, devoted to maintaining order and balance in the world as decreed by their king. It is these ruling nations that will all find themselves entangled in this war in some way or another. In order to escape Dayan's ruthless pursuit, the Greil mercenaries flee to the neighboring country of Gallia. The ruling families of both Crimea and Gallia share friendly relations with each other, and so Elincia hopes that she can seek the Lion King Cainigus for aid. But many in the group, Ike included, have never seen Laguz before. When asked, Shinon answers his curiosity with a notably distasteful tone, calling them half-breed subhuman creatures. Upon meeting them for the first time, Ike parrots this term to Ranulf, who is one that works very closely with their king, and is greatly offended by this. Ike meant no ill intent, he didn't know what else to call them, and made a note to use the term Laguz from then on. But you witness how quickly they're triggered from a name that they find offensive, yet one that we initially didn't bat an eye to. Consider this encounter for a bit longer. We had no context for what the Laguz were ourselves, we're just as clueless as Ike was. Shinon's prejudiced comments were very deliberately presented to us first to give us a biased opinion of the Laguz. This is because, unfortunately, most people in the world have this very same viewpoint and opinion as his. And to many Laguz, Bjork are seen as simple, clumsy, incapable beings. A Bjork calling a Laguz subhuman and a Laguz calling a Bjork human are often said in scorn and as an insult to the other. This racial divide serves as a very prominent factor throughout the narrative. King Cainigus has seen both sides of Bjork behavior towards his people, and shares the idyllic world that he saw with Elincia's father, one where Laguz and Bjork can achieve coexistence. It is his wish to aid Elincia in her journey to return to Crimea, but the elders of the Senate below him make it difficult to rush to their aid. The vast majority of the populace just cannot tolerate one another. Because of this, they are forced to turn to Benyon for help. It was when the crew went on a voyage at sea to Benyon that I noticed something else. This game is very good at letting you know where you are on the world map. I love the fact that I can trace out Ike's whole journey from start to finish with the consistent and relevant return of the Tellius world map throughout the story. That might just be the visual learner inside of me talking though. Benyon is a pivotal location that we're going to be coming back to several times. It's not only the country that Elincia needs the support of to reclaim Crimea, it also makes us, the players, realize how terrible the overall state of the world is, both on and under the surface. The tiny empress of this land, Sanaki, first appears as another noble who is full of themselves and finds Elincia's situation amusing upon their first meeting. But similar to the King of Lions, she wishes to mend the relations with Laguz, utilizing the help of Ike's group in her case. While we're here, these formal interactions that we see displays Ike's distaste for the upper class, and it's written in such a way that we're not supposed to like them either. They're pompous, insincere, greedy. When Ike sees Sanaki teasing him and Elincia, he understandably gets frustrated when her people in Crimea are living in terror. He could care less about the noble classes and prefers to stand on equal ground with everyone, much like how he effortlessly has done so with all the Laguz he's met thus far. It doesn't help when Ike needs to assume the title of General and Lord in order to have a status more befitting the army escorting Princess Crimea back home. Through his efforts, while he does obtain a title on par with other protagonists of Fire Emblem, he does not have an attachment to any noble house. Everything from sailing to Benyon to his appointment as a lord is such a fascinating look at how rich this world's story is. Ike is ambushed by the Raven tribe, and in the same chapter, he has a chance meeting with the Prince of the Dragon tribe when their ship runs aground in Goldoa. Kurthnaga is a gentle and peaceful prince who is more fascinated by the Bjork than anything, and is pleased to come to their aid. Ike witnesses the good and ill intentions of Laguz mere moments apart, furthering the case that there are good and bad people in both races. Seems like common sense to us, but this is coming from the perspective of those living in a world where the two try to disassociate entirely with one another. Path of Radiance is a title filled with perspective and the subjectivity the people rule themselves by. The Greil Mercenaries are used to expand the horizon of our opinions while also being the vehicle from which we witness a lot of political commentary. When Crimea finally marches from Benyon towards Dayan, we, of course, are cheering for our heroes. But we also consistently see the struggles that the people are going through. To Dayan, we are an invasion force of killers seeking to take the head off of their King Ashnard, or at the very least conquer the capital and lay claim to its people. The general public doesn't realize that, however. Their ignorance paints a completely different picture, and the community likely all comes in agreement, if not merely to justify themselves. It's not like the mercenaries can just tell them, hey, we're not the bad guys. For all they know, Crimea is out for blood and revenge. It's a theme repeated over and over. It especially hits when visiting the region of Talrega. A platoon of wyvern riders became adored by the people who lived there and share stories of them helping the citizens with manual labor and menial tasks. Yet we as Crimeans have to push our way through, and our only option is to slay their local heroes. This small faction floods the land in order to slow Crimea down, but the citizens convince themselves that it was our fault, refusing to see the full picture. Ike tries to make peace by offering supplies, but do they even fully accept this act of charity from their enemies? We move on too quickly to find out. This is just one example of several characters that have such a unique and lasting impression in the world of Tellius. Nearly every single character that you meet and ally yourself with bears some significance in your journey. Something I didn't mention earlier when talking about the base was another significant change for the series. In almost every chapter, you're able to have a conversation with a variety of characters, each of varying importance. If the conversation is marked with 3 stars, you'll receive some kind of item or even a unit who joins your army. If it's 2 stars, you'll be told important information to keep in mind for the next battle. This is somewhat like the augury system from the Blazing Blade, where the fortune teller will tell you little hints to make your next battle easier. I appreciate that they somewhat made a return and seamlessly integrated them into a fun back and forth. Finally, if the conversation is just 1 star, you'll listen into a simple extra little chat. Most often, it won't benefit you in the next map and is there solely for world building. But this addresses one of the main problems Fire Emblem had previously. When a unit joins your party, they often lose their relevance as soon as the chapter ends and just become another soldier in your army. The base does so much to give screen time to characters, making many of them stand out and remain relevant for more than just that single chapter. It doesn't fully address the problem, though there's still certainly a lot of characters who still get set aside in favor of those who are clearly more relevant to the plot. But it's a step in the right direction, especially for those of us who love to absorb as much of this world as possible. It's also such a different mood compared to arranging your units before a battle. Sure, you can do almost everything here that you can at a base, but there's a relaxed, momentary peace to these conversations as opposed to the tension before a fight. We are, unfortunately, still limited to only 5 support conversations per playthrough. We can get a single pair up to A rank and then 1 to B rank. Thankfully, the requirements to trigger these are much more friendly. Now, you simply have to deploy compatible units on the same map enough times until the conversations make themselves available. It's another great way to flesh out the personality of smaller characters, but it's held back by a limitation that we wouldn't see lifted until Fire Emblem Awakening. The base was a step in the right direction to having much more character interaction. It remains one of my favorite systems in any Fire Emblem title. These conversations are but one of several ways that we can learn about the world around us, from thoughts of our recently joined allies to working through one's own personal fears. But we have to put a spotlight on the people who helped define and give Tellius its identity. The Laguz share a deeply rich and painful history together. Ike and the Greil Mercenaries come to realize that restoring Crimea also means gradually mending the bridges between his people and theirs. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance is a story that addresses both racism and political corruption. Other titles have gone into worldly political matters, but this is one that does a very good job at introducing and expanding the gravity of how all-encompassing it is with each and every chapter. We learn at the same pace that Ike does that despite the obvious differences in appearance, Laguz aren't so different from you and I. Mechanically, they are units that can only fight when transformed. There's a gauge that shows how close they are to changing, and that same bar goes back down until it hits 0 and they revert. While in this form, their stats are greatly increased. A cat like Leith is very fast but will have less defense. A tiger like Mordecai will have a lot of bulk and strength but not as much speed. None of the Laguz, be they beast, bird, or dragon, follow the traditional weapon triangle. They do all have a weakness though, like how fire is effective against beasts and wind against birds. Extra effectiveness in this game isn't as pronounced as in other titles, making things like arrows against flyers a bit less effective, but that's beside the point. The Laguz are powerful additions that change up how to plan battles around them, whether they're your allies or enemies. This leaks into a narrative as well. At first glance, some Laguz like Leith are appalled at how slow the Bjork are, and how inconvenient it is for them to carry so much armor and weapons just to fight. But when asked about why she carries a knife, a Bjork-made item, her argument cracks a little, and you can see how even someone as rigid as her can show a desire to see both races more equally. Chapter 11, Blood Runs Red, is a very eye-opening chapter. While it sits in Crimea, it is so far away from the capital that the echoes of war aren't heard here. People are going about their day, blissfully and ignorantly enjoying their simple lives in the ports. In a way, the peace is a blessing, and it is a sign that things like Laguz hunts are no longer actively happening. Ranulf and the others in our party have to disguise themselves from the merry townsfolk as they seek passage on a ship. Everything seems fine and jolly until the moment somebody bumps into Ranulf and they reveal themselves as a Laguz. All of a sudden, the people change into violent and fearful creatures. Because of the peace established between their kings, Ranulf cannot act or defend himself, and so Ike comes to his aid. By helping him, they are also marked as enemies, making their escape to the ship that much more difficult. Later in the story, Ike mentions how frightening it was to see people turn suddenly. There was scorn, fear, and overall misunderstanding about the people they treated as friends just moments before. These people didn't mind or think any less of them at all until realizing the truth. They also didn't mind the war happening in the capital or even who rules over them so long as they have their way of life go unchanged. It shows you that humans are shameless creatures that carelessly ignore any misfortune which does not befall them directly, They can, and often do, turn a blind eye to all manner of wickedness, so long as it doesn't touch them or their kin. They will bow their heads, condemning those victims for bringing calamity upon themselves, and they will cast their eyes towards heaven in thanks while their neighbors lay dying around them. And if that's too heavy for you, that was actually a quote from Soren. It makes you think, though, how harsh will the reality be when we finally can't ignore the misfortunes that we pretend not to see? There are a lot of great quotes in this chapter. It's one that really makes me appreciate the writing and characters like Soren, who give worldviews that far too often characters in our own band are too polite to address. This applies to our day-to-day life as much as it does to the prejudice between Bjork and Laguz. But our visit in Bennion shows how difficult it will be to bridge this gap. Through a series of very specific missions sent by Empress Sanaki, Ike and the group discover how horrible their conditions and status have been in recent years. An encounter with a band of thugs show how Laguz can be given drugs that lock them in their animal forms, granting them much power but warping their minds. These feral ones will be seen much more later, exclusively deployed by the Dayan army. Not long after, we meet a group of Laguz refugees, do battle with Moiram, and meet a young boy, Tormod, who was raised by them. These Laguz were, at some point, enslaved by those in Bennion. As slaves, they were used for service, entertainment, or flaunted as a status symbol. About 20 years ago, slavery was abolished and made illegal, but there are those who will still keep them or even sell and trade them in a twisted sort of black market. It's most often the noble classes and the Senate to which this applies to. Moiram and Tormod work with the rest of their group as an emancipation organization to free Laguz slaves, and are thus treated as bandits. This leads to the Apostle requesting that they look into suspected trafficking at one of the Senator's manors in particular. And upon seizing control of Duke Oliver's estate, they catch a glimpse of a Laguz with white feathers who relays a message to the group. Remember the genocide. 20 years have passed, but I will not forgive what you did. This sends Ike straight back to the Apostle, and he is not in a good mood. I gotta say, this entire portion of the game while in Bennion is where Ike shines the most. Oh, she's having a nice meeting right now? Good for her, I'm coming in. It's been stated to us on more than one occasion that Sanaki is a symbol of Bennion itself that deserves the utmost respect when being addressed, but nah, Ike isn't in the mood for that. He demands to know what happened 20 years ago, right away. Since the moment he entered this territory, he's felt entirely out of his elements, making a base out of an imperial castle and expected to follow all of his traditions and customs. But my man can't stand how stuffy, uptight, and pompous everyone around him seems. He actively shows his dislike for the nobility and forces restraint in order to keep good standing with Elincia, because everybody knows Crimea needs Bennion if they hope to gain any momentum in this war. It's just so fascinating to see a main character in a game like this be so pragmatic. In a series where nearly every single main character is shoved into lawful good, Ike sits alone at the table under true neutral. In the same time frame, Ike addresses how Makalov's reckless spending was all paid off in order to have to not deal with debt collectors. He basically goes, "Guess what, boy? Now you're working for us for free." And honestly, I don't feel bad at all considering Makalov is a disaster of a character who gives his little sister nothing but grief. Ike doesn't really care about status. People are people. Whether it's his fellow mercenaries, a princess, the half-beast Laguz, or the empress of an entire nation, people are people to him. It becomes one of the traits that naturally draws everyone to him. This was a major arc that shows how Ike will recognize having more people at his command is beneficial, but he isn't willing to tolerate behavior that goes against any of his core values. So when it comes to hearing what the Apostle has to say, Ike is just already done before they even go into detail about the tragedy. 20 years ago, the previous Apostle of Bennion was assassinated, and rumors spread that the Heron tribe of the nearby Serenus forest were responsible. But the Herons are a peaceful tribe, and were falsely accused of this crime. Because of the grief fueled in the hearts by the Bennion citizenry, they set the forest ablaze, robbing the world of nearly the entire Heron clan. Sanaki, who intentionally led Ike to piece together the corruption in the land, seeks to address and atone in any way that she can for her people's action in the past. She might be using them since they're an outside faction, but she does mean well in her pursuits. The Heron that was seen for a brief moment is the prince of their tribe, Rayson, who harbors a deep and understandable hatred for the Bjork that stole his home and family away from him. He is under the care of the Hawk King, Tabarn, and keeps a strong relationship with the fellow bird tribes. Well, except for the ravens. It was the king of Kilvis, Naesala, who sorta tricked his old friend Rayson and sold him off to the Duke in the first place. Remember, the Ravens aren't exactly well liked by anyone. A major turning point is when the Greil mercenaries seek the lost heron in the Serenus forest. Duke Oliver is spotted and they give pursuit, starting the longest chapter in the entire game. Chapter 17, Daybreaks, is split into 4 parts where everyone seeks to put an end to Oliver and his forces. Halfway through this, Ike and company make a surprising discovery. There is yet another heron who has just awakened after being shielded by the forest. Leanne is Rayson's sister, the princess of Serenus, and faints after being approached by Ike. While you're protecting her, Tabarn, his retainers, and Rayson take notice and come to their aid. It is fortunate timing, as Rayson was preparing to unleash a forbidden dirge that would have taken out everyone in the forest. These bird tribes immediately earn their trust for protecting one of the last herons in the world. And at the end of this long chapter, Sanaki approaches the heron brother and sister to give a most heartfelt apology. She knows it can never be enough, and Rayson is still hesitant to listen, but Leanne speaks to her brother from her heart, knowing that hate will only breed more hate. They come to an understanding to leave the incident in the past. We learn that while Rayson does have the power to unleash destructive magic through the arcane power of the heron's song, they are also capable of restoration. With the 2 siblings together, they combine their powers known as Galrar and take their first step in moving on by reinvigorating the pulse back into Serenus Forest once more. What's fascinating is that the heron language you've seen on screen can be fully translated. Every letter has a Roman alphabet equivalent, and every instance of this dialogue can be understood if you took the time. There is never anything exceptionally groundbreaking, at least lore-wise, hidden within these conversations though. It's mainly there to give Leanne characterization while still making her feel mysterious and foreign. And their songs hold a sacred power that is used to aid the party. Rayson's Galder gives its listener the strength to move with the speed of 2 people. It's a clever way to introduce the refresher who can give your units an extra turn. When transformed, he can sing to up to 4 adjacent allies in 1 turn, the most powerful refresher we've ever seen in Fire Emblem, at least in English releases. The songs of the herons prove to be a very significant facet of the plot as you discover more about the lore. Something I have not mentioned up until now was a very curious item held by Ike's sister, Mist. A mysterious bronze medallion that begins to glow around the time of the war's beginning. This is deeply tied to both Rayson and Leanne's sister, Lilia, as well as Ike and Mrs. Mother, Elena. In the past, they were locked away and supported one another, despite their language barrier. Lilia was kept in a small room and expected to perform a task that she didn't have the power to do, involving the very same medallion. It was entrusted to Ike's mother, along with the melody of a song. It is later revealed that this is no mere trinket. According to legend, within this item is the entity of a dark god. The reason that there is both an ominous light and weight to it is that it is beginning to stir. One of Ashnard's goals is to wake this dark god and unleash the terrors and judgment that it would bring upon the world. Because of the energy that shrouds the medallion as it begins to rouse, it is also known by another name, the Fire Emblem. There are very few who have complete balance and order in their being who can safely hold the medallion, with Mist and the herons being some of those people. If most others were to touch it directly, they would go mad. This is one of the key concerns held by the Laguz kings of Tellius, who all come together for a meeting halfway through the story to discuss how they should approach the warring Bjork. We see the sole appearance of Degensia, the Black Dragon King of Goldoa, who summoned this council. There's a bit of a debate. While Goldoa insists on remaining neutral in all manners, Caenagus vouches strongly for Crimea and warns that Gallia could be invaded next. Though he wants to aid the Bjork nation, the Hawk tribe holds a grudge against Banyan for destroying the Serenus forest. The kings do agree that if the Laguz begin to ally together at this stage, Banyan may side with Dayan and fan the war until the entire continent becomes embroiled. This gathering shows how, in many cases, the Laguz are portrayed as having more class, structure, and a mindful philosophy of the world than the Bjork nations. The traces of a harsh past and scars are present. Our vision of Laguz changes and evolves with Ike through his eyes and experience. And thanks to him becoming the connecting thread between all these nations, the Greil mercenaries march north with Banyan at their back, slowly gathering momentum as other territories like Phoenicis and Gallia rally behind them. I think at this point it is important to remember who the story is also just as importantly about. The key figure that sets everything in motion and pushes the story forward. Not the King of Dayan Ashnard, not Ike and his fellow mercenaries. I would be remiss to not take a moment and acknowledge one of the most important characters in this story, the Princess of Crimea herself. I don't really ever see anyone talk about Elincia when it comes to Path of Radiance, and for the most part, yeah, I get it. You're often focused on battles where she doesn't really have a presence. She's mainly introduced as a damsel. She leaves the party every so often, or ends up getting left behind. She doesn't know anything about ruling, so when or if we get her back to Crimea, what then? She's just going to learn to rule a country on the fly? Matters don't even look good from the start. But at the same time, she is the single force that gets the Greil mercenaries moving, after not even a single day in-game. Dayan's bloodthirsty pursuit of her is all the proof that anyone needs of her credibility. No one is questioning if she's the princess or not. But when the real problem of this war is Ashnard, how relevant is Elincia? I feel she becomes the most fascinating when you consider everything seen from her eyes. We get the perspective of somebody who led a very different life from a typical princess. Living in secret means you're not formally tied to customs and traditions. While much of her life was spent within a castle, she is capable of other things like swordplay and riding a horse, which she discusses with Mist. And she responds saying how Elincia is not what she expected and that she's a lot more capable than what she imagined a princess would be. At the same time, she's never seen something as simple as a town before. People just living their lives, the hustle and bustle of the common people. It's fascinating. Not extravagant or groundbreaking, just people getting by. With Chapter 11 in particular, the carefree and busy energy makes everyone forget a war is even happening, for better or worse. But it's one facet of the world around her that makes Elincia much more aware of how people live. For as much as the narrative tends to lean away from Elincia, the times where it does focus on her are never throwaway moments. When Crimean refugees of the war discover Elincia is safe, it bolsters their confidence. Her presence is always calming. She never acts as though she's higher or mightier than anybody else. She isn't too unlike Ike, where she sees people on the same level as herself, perhaps because she's only a princess in title. Despite your common tropes, there's never a situation where Elincia gets stolen away and has to be rescued by her knights in shining armor. Thankfully, every single person under her care is never so reckless as to let her get taken away. As with everyone else they've ever done business with, she is simply the one who requested the Greil mercenaries for aid and are working to see their job completed. I don't know how many other people can relate to this, but she isn't too unlike Guinevere in Fire Emblem the Binding Blade. She travels with your company and wants to see the war come to an end when the one on the throne begins to terrorize the land. In her case, it was her brother Zephiel. This is a war that needs to be stopped no matter what. They both share similar convictions and a love for their kingdom, even if they, for the most part, are powerless to help from afar. There are some more social differences between them, as Guinevere is actively fighting against her homeland to save it, but they assist however they can despite being in a relatively powerless position behind our main characters. And both are greatly supported by their knights and retainers who follow closely behind them. During their long trek back home, when everyone crosses the Great Bridge and touches Crimean soil once again, Elincia is quickly met with her longtime friend Lucia. Not long after, we see Elincia's entire composure change when they're speaking together. She's smiling, she's laughing, and they're both longing to meet up with the rest of their group. Crimean soldiers have been in hiding, posing as commoners and awaiting the day to dust off their armor and unsheath their weapons once again. When Lucia realized that the fort holding many of these people was under siege, Elincia defiantly fought back when she was told to abandon them. While many knights would agree that her safety is the most important, she cherishes her people too much to simply leave them to a losing battle. It's not until Ike jumps in and says, "Nah, we can take them," that they chase Dayan away and have a grand reunion. She keeps a very strong front and tries her best to keep a positive attitude to continue raising morale for Ike's army. When she finally sees familiar allies from her castle, we again witness her real self in fleeting glimpses. She's just a young woman thrust into an outside world with no one to rely on. And once she arrives home, she is greeted with such respect from her people and allies. Citizens rejoice for a princess they have never heard of before. I hope someone in the world made a rallying sign that said something like, "We're fighting day in and day out. And if you don't like it, you can cry me a river." Anyways, in Crimea's bleakest hours, she serves as a beacon of hope for a country that is being run to the ground by Ashnard. And her morale rises, seeing everybody rally with her. So much so that after several chapters and great battles despite all odds, the princess herself decides it's time to take to the field. Towards the end of the game, Elincia joins as a unique class that can fly on Pegasus and heal with a staff. She has a special blade called Amity, which functions as a brave weapon, but will never dull or break. This is mostly to assist her, joining as a level 1 unit. While many people won't find the value in deploying her more than required, it is more so narratively speaking how meaningful it is to have her join the fight. I don't know a lot of games where the supposed damsel in distress becomes a damsel causing distress for their enemies. At least that's how it is in my case. I don't know if you noticed or not, but I do have a favorite character in this game. I do not care if she is playable for only a few chapters total. I will highly invest in our Princess Crimea and see her sweet blade game whether it was intended to be or not. I can also imagine it's something of a cathartic release to begin chopping up Daean soldiers and picking them right off of her own homeland. I find it very satisfying. It's as though as soon as the game realized that her relevancy was beginning to taper off, they bring her right back to the forefront again. And I just love how she is able to live up to the ray of hope that everyone needs. Ike teasingly refers to her as a lucky charm. I don't think anyone who praises or reveres her presence is exaggerating. Except maybe Bastion, but he's always like that. The truth is, Crimea needs Elincia, the Greil Mercenaries need Elincia. The entire story would not be possible if it wasn't for Elincia. Listen, I know who the favorite girls of Tellius are. It is not who they say it is. To be fair, she might still seem like a character who is lacking in terms of potential and depth. Part of the reason why she's my favorite is when you also consider how this goes hand in hand with the sequel, Radiant Dawn. Seeing where her story continues beyond Path of Radiance, despite having a smaller role in that game, makes me care about and appreciate her even more. There's a lot about Radiant Dawn that I enjoy more, while having this title as context, but we can't dive into that right now. Look how long this video is already. For all the good that Path of Radiance does, there are still some aspects about it that has me wanting for more. This game has an abundance of story, lore, character developments, and very thought-provoking moments that make the narrative feel a step ahead of other Fire Emblems. It's very well done and balanced. I think many fans of the series will agree and have a hard time finding any glaring flaws, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, because when it comes down to it, the gameplay itself, it's still Fire Emblem. Even with all of its changes, it's still not truly a leap from the titles on the Game Boy Advance. It doesn't help that the enemy phase can take a very long time in some cases, even when you speed up the game under options. Hope you're ready to also hear these jingles over and over again at the start of each turn. They're not that offensive, even if they do last a couple of seconds too long. In presentation, the game has certainly made some improvements. In battles though, this is more of a half step. Path of Radiance is the first Fire Emblem where battles are animated in 3D, and if you've been watching thus far, you'll probably agree that they're mostly pretty stiff looking. Some characters are just recolors of enemy units, or vice versa, and the map models are very humorously polygonal. Not that it matters too much, we don't exactly get a huge zoom in very often. I do have an issue with Ike's early animation though. I just don't understand why he has to have this unga bunga pose. Who holds their sword like this? At least he straightens up after promoting. And I also think it's really cool that they translated Ike's critical hit animation to be a side special in Smash Bros. They didn't have a lot of places to pull moves from. The magic looks really cool in this game though, especially at higher levels. You've got wind spells like Tornado, long distance lightning magic like Bolting is back. This crazy fire spell, Baloney, that's how you spell it, right? This game sadly didn't have the S-rank tones for all magic types, likely due to development cuts, so Baloney is actually the strongest fire spell in the game. Kind of a shame. Unfortunately, something has to be sacrificed when we depart from the visual style that's been the series' identity for several years. We definitely don't reach the level of artistic finesse that the GBA Fire Emblems took with battle sprites and critical hit animations. Some of that magic here is lost, so to speak. But for as lackluster as some of the animations are, there are some real winners too. Did you know that the animation for Aether originates on the Game Boy Advance? This animation of taking the sword, throwing it in the air, jumping and slashing upon landing started right here. And what unit class has this animation? It is specifically the Mercenary class. I never get tired of seeing Ike pulling off Aether. Once you use that occult scroll on him, he starts popping that off a lot. The shimmering sound effect when it activates, the way the camera zooms up and down, and the sound effects are so satisfying. That's something we don't have anymore. The sound design in battle has been lacking so much in recent Fire Emblem. The really loud, exaggerated hits in battle made such a strong difference. You felt that impact. I really miss the loud cymbal clash every time a critical hit connects. It just makes those hits feel so good. I do wish that all the skills were exciting to watch and useful as Aether. The truth is, skills are kind of hit or miss, like all the way hits or all the way miss. You get really useful ones like Adept for more hits, Paragon for ×2 experience, Resolve which boosts stats if you're at half health, and then there's some kind of pointless ones out there like Renewal that heals a tiny amount of HP per turn, Corrosion which is more annoying for the enemy to have. There's almost never a reason to reduce the enemy's weapon durability. Gamble will double crits, but that doesn't really matter much because it'll half your normal hit rates, and the game needs to check and meet the hit rate percentage before it meets the crit rate percentage, making it kinda redundant. And of all the skills you do earn, you have to fully commit to the person you're going to use them on. If you remove a skill, that's it is gone forever. This gets adjusted for the better in the sequel, Radiant Dawn, where you can remove basic skills from anyone and stick them on somebody else. But unfortunately, here, you just have to analyze and judge whether a character is a good fit for a given skill. Occult skills, as in class-specific skills, are limited and questionable at times. Some look cool, but aren't really that great in practice, like Astra. It will reduce your weapon's durability by 5 no matter what, and hardly procs, at least for me in my playthrough. Then there's Deadeye, which will put an enemy to sleep, but most often will be on a sniper that'll take them out anyways. There have been times where I put someone to sleep and just kinda stall as we focus on other enemies, so we can give that a pass. Skills were in the middle of being reworked here, and Path of Radiance was an important stepping stone to the systems we have in place now. There's just a whole lot that this game doesn't tell you. Part of the fun is discovering the little mysteries on your own, of course, but sometimes it's a little too abstract. If you want to re-recruit Shinon later in the game, you can't just talk to him with Ike like most other units. You have to talk to him with Rolf first, and then defeat him with Ike in battle, specifically Ike. I definitely couldn't figure that out my first time, and I think most people won't be using Rolf on their first playthrough. But if you want to talk about incredibly vague and obscure recruitments, Chapter 15 has probably one of the most infamously hidden characters in the series. In many desert maps, it is tradition to be able to find hidden items in the sand as you stand in certain groups of tiles. Well, of all of these tiles, you need to go to the very opposite side of the map, in the very corner, and stand on this tile, this specific tile. Do so, and you'll meet Stefan, one of the strongest units in the game with the powerful S-rank sword Veikari. Except for the vast majority of characters who stop on this one square, they'll be greeted, called an odd duck, and be given the sword before leaving forever. So, what the heck? What you actually have to do here is have either of your Laguz allies, Leith or Mordecai, stand here. You get a unique conversation, and then Stefan will join you, sword and all. There is a brief mention in the base before this that mysterious figures have been seen to the northeast, but it's such a quick little blurb that a lot of people probably won't have paid it any mind. Stefan himself is a pretty funny character. The green hair, the unit class, and the outfit pretty clearly make him a reference to Lyn, right down to the weapon sounding like it's from the same family as her preferred weapons, too. Once you know, but I remember looking back in player's guides for this game and thinking to myself, who is this guy? There's the return of the triangle attack in this game too. You have to very specifically use the three brothers for this. There's a base conversation where they talk about an ultimate attack and they just have Oscar try to figure it out and make it look cool. But what you need to do is promote Boyd and also promote Oscar and give him the bow specifically. Then you have to arrange your units for an instant critical hit. Good luck figuring that out on your own. Oh, and late in the game, you can also do the classic Pegasus Knight triangle attack too. But here's the thing, not only do you have to be using Elincia, Marcia, and Tanith, they tell you about this, and then remove Elincia for the next battle. This makes the final chapter the only actual chapter you can utilize this in. When you start to really pick it apart, you start to see how not everything was as planned as they had hoped. Producer Toru Narihiro stated in an interview that there were some regrets that they had about the quality of the game, saying that he considered it to be only 70% complete. The story, all the way through its sequel to Radiant Dawn, was already written by the time that this game had released. It was more the execution that was unsatisfactory in the end. I just wanted to lay out some of the criticisms that myself and others who are longtime fans of the game had with it. Some nitpicky, others more prominent throughout the game, but I think it's the overall story that sticks with us the most. And you might be wondering about certain characters I have still yet to bring up. From here on, it's a bit more spoilery about you-know-who and the end of the game, so if you want to save this for later, feel free to stop here now. But if you're still here, we will continue right into the heart of Ike's journey. It is impossible to even begin with spoilers in this game without talking about Greil and the Black Knight. Ike's father is portrayed as someone who everyone in the mercenary group can trust their life with. The gap between him and Ike are shown as early as the first moments, and we further understand his real strength as he holds his own against Petrine, one of the 4 riders of Dayan. Nothing like a romantic battle to the death. Chapter 7, Shades of Evil, is one of the most important chapters in the game. The group finds themselves surrounded before being saved by the Laguz of Gallia. Just as Petrine is determined to fight on against the entire lot, a heavily armored knight appears and tells her to retreat. She obeys without question, and Greil trades stares with him in silence. This is the Black Knight, another of the 4 riders. With little to say, he quietly retreats, but leaves Greil uncharacteristically distracted. It appears there's a very curious relation between these two. That night, Ike catches his father leaving the fort. They share the most natural father and son moment up to what we've seen thus far, as Greil asks Ike what he remembers about his mother. There's not much he can recall, so the discussion ends fairly quickly and he's prompted to head back inside. But curious as he is, Ike can't help but follow. Finally catching up, he discovers the two fighting, but is told to stay back. They appear evenly matched, and before the battle continues, the Black Knight tosses a massive sword to him. This is definitely one of those scenes that is sorely lacking in subtitles, so I'll add them myself.
Here, use this blade.
What are you doing?
I've been waiting for this for a long time. I would prefer it if you use your proper weapon, so that I might see you at your full strength. General Gawain, rider of Dayan.
That was my name. Once. But I threw it away. The only weapon I need is right here.
Do you want to die?
Your voice. I remember you. Think you can defeat me, the man who taught you how to fight? What a fool. Come on, boy. Come try me.
Is that all there is? No challenge? No resistance?
Greil manages to hang on for a while longer. Ike fends off the Black Knight, if only by chance, as the roar of a lion echoes in the forest. He retreats, leaving Ike to carry his father all the way back to the base. The rain falls, and Greil is using whatever strength he has left to tell Ike to forget the war, forget the Black Knight, forget everything. He wants Ike to take his sister and live in peace within Gallia. We get a shot of everyone coming to their aid outside the fortress as the chapter comes to an end. The next chapter begins with an early memory of Ike training with his father. And then we see Ike and Mist at Greil's grave. I know there's a bit of a trope in Fire Emblem, right? The father or mother dies. It's very common even today. But consider every game up to this point, even the ones that were Japan only. Nearly every parental or family member who passes were often on screen for a very short amount of time. We had no time to get to know them, understand them, or see them interact with their child. While many of the protagonist stories happen in part because of their death, we don't have any particular attachment to them. Greil is different. We see him teaching Ike while being a leader to his group. We get an idea of his power and just a glimpse of him being a normal father to his son. And his passing causes a major shift in tone. Ike immediately takes up the mantle of commander of the group, and everyone responds to it differently. Characters like Boy talk about how Greil gave his brothers their lives back, and feels like a part of the mercenary family. Shinon loses it and immediately leaves without a second thought. And then there are those who are in deep mourning. I feel this was the first time that I was impacted by the death of a character like this. And from that point on, the resolve amongst this small band of normal mercenaries changes. The group needs to carry on with Ike learning as he goes, with the shadow of the Black Knight haunting his sleep. It doesn't even take that long until they meet again. Just a few chapters later, he shows up in what is perhaps one of the most famous buildings in this series. This tiny, unsuspecting house strikes fear in the hearts of Fire Emblem fans. If this is your first playthrough, it is very possible that you'll have someone just casually standing around here when disaster strikes. If you pass a certain threshold in this chapter, the next turn will start like this. And guess what? You don't have any time to react. Unlike most enemies who appear at the end of a turn, the Black Knight will advance to anyone within range as soon as he appears. For some, that might be Ike himself. It's actually kind of heartbreaking. If you end up in this scenario, Ike loses all composure and attempts to defeat an enemy that he has zero chance of winning against. He'll be defeated and you get a little bit of extra dialogue, but that's definitely never happened to you, right? On hard mode, this man will approach you like a shark in a kiddie pool. You do not want to get close. Compare stats with anyone on your team with the Black Knight. This is not some kind of challenge, it is unwinnable. At the end of the chapter, Randolph attempts to go toe-to-tail with the knight himself and nearly gets killed. After what happened to Greil, I honestly wasn't sure if he was going to survive either, and the writing definitely knew that to keep you on your toes. It's not until a mysterious figure approaches and commands the Black Knight to stand down. He is surprisingly obedient and right away backs off without a second thought. You probably already met this beautiful man Sephirin just a chapter earlier, in prison of all places. If you were to check everyone that was locked up, your stats are pretty close to theirs. Makes sense if you're going to recruit them, right? But here's the thing, if you happen to check Sephirin's stats, huh? Maximum magic, skill, resistance, and crazy luck? S rank in light magic and stabs? A mantle skill which vaguely and greatly reduces damage? Who is this guy? Well, it's not just some monk as he was claiming to be. This is yet another Duke of Benyon, and the one with the closest relation to Sanaki. He's thankfully a lot more agreeable than pretty much everyone else in the Senate. What a curious character. But yes, throughout the course of the game, the Black Knight will be making appearances here and there, including being responsible for stealing Leanne away. Ah, there's our classic princess in distress. Partway during the march to Crimea, Ike is told a secret tale from Volk, an assassin posing as a thief, passed down from Greil. The secret of his past is a sad one. Once, Greil had come in contact with a medallion that Mist now holds. Back then, he went berserk and killed everyone within his vicinity, even those he had called friends. In a desperate move, their mother jumped in and pulled the medallion away, but at the cost of her life. Realizing what he had done, he left Dayan and his title as one of the 4 riders. He crippled himself so that he might never wield a sword ever again. Based on their conversation, we learn that whoever the Black Knight is, he trained under Greil when he was known as Sir Gawain. What would the outcome of that fateful battle in the clearing been if he had been at his full strength? We might never know. The real climax to Ike's story comes in chapter 27, Moment of Fate. Your entire journey is pretty much building up Ike to be able to take on the Black Knight, because you can indeed fail. Having Ike learn Aether is absolutely important. Once the main chapter ends, you enter an area where you can either 1v1 him or escape from the tower. You now also have his main weapon, Ragnell, at your disposal. Miss will also appear. I hope you trained her to at least promote, because her healing will prove essential. To be honest, this all sorta comes down to luck, and if your Ike can survive a hit from the Black Knight's Luna, because oh, it can hurt. It is such an emotionally charged moment, and I love how it's never something where you can be certain that you'll win. In every playthrough, this duel can go one way or the other, no matter how much you invest in Ike. Narratively speaking, it's brilliant. You'll take Ina, who has been an adversary up to this point, and you'll also have Nasir on your team for the remainder of the game. If you escape, due to perhaps being too low of a level, you'll have Ina on your team as Nasir sacrifices himself to stop the Black Knight. This is not the canonical outcome though. However, if you do lose in this battle, you have to do part 1 of this chapter all over again, so there's kind of a lot at stake. This very important subplot, arguably just as important as the main plot, demonstrates a lot of growth for Ike. You're very intentionally shown his stats from the very beginning when he pops out of the house. It's meant to tell you that you have pretty much no chance against this guy, and that any encounter will result in your units dying. How am I supposed to conquer this? But if you train your units well enough, including Ike, you'll be able to stand a fighting chance. It's also definitely worth noting a little detail about the final battle here too. Ashnard has taken residence upon Crimea Castle and everyone has had enough. The Crimean army is at their doorstep and the final battle takes place in a lovely little garden. This is nothing like any setting we're used to for a final battle. It's so tranquil and ordinary, and I think that's what makes it more upsetting. Something just feels so real about this. It's not some supernatural setting or anything, you're just fighting for the ground that you're standing on. Throughout the story, Ashnard's real goal was to unleash the Dark God either through the Galder of the Herons or by causing a war that involves every territory in the continent. If it unleashes, it is very possible that the entire rest of the world will be submerged into the sea. And thankfully, after a long road, Ike manages to slay the king and reclaim the land. Unless you're playing on hard mode. In this mode, Ashnard will chase you down and with a movement of 10, it is very hard to escape this man. The real problem is after you fell him once, he will touch the medallion and unleash his second form, increasing his stats and continuing the battle. The real catch here is there's not really anyone who can damage Ashnard except for Ike's Ragnell and Nasir or Ina. By this point, you can summon one of the Laguz royalty to help you, either Tabarn, Henigus' attendant Gifka, or even Naysala. And you know I'm going to put the Raven King to work because that also gives us some of the funniest dialogue in the game. The real trick here is using the terrain to your advantage. I think this fountain formation single-handedly saved this entire run from losing any units. But if you happen to send any other units to Ashnard, you will likely get some very interesting dialogue. This is like your one chance to get to know the guy better, as you've gone nearly the entire game not knowing much else aside from the fact that he wants bloodshed and war. Ashnard, for any lack of better terms, is crazy, like actually insane. This entire conflict will become known in the history of Tellius as the Mad King's War. With teamwork, alliances, and a little bit of luck, this chapter of war comes to a close. There are so many parts of this game that stick with me today. Throughout the journey, Ina, an enemy-turned-ally, mentions now and then that she wants to be near the one that she loves. We're fooled into thinking that it's Ashnard, but upon his fall, she comes out and approaches his mount. It's not simply a wyvern, it is actually a black dragon of Goldoa and her lover, transformed by the evil machinations of Dayan. Through the use of the Heron's song, he shares his final moments with his mind intact and beside his beloved, however short it was destined to be. Everything that her grandfather, Nasir, did in this journey was all to aid her, and I think it's a beautiful moment that describes how symbolic one of Fire Emblem's most powerful recurring themes is. It's all about family. From the very first cutscene, we see Ike and Greil training, and a memory of Elena at his side. When he wakes up, it is shown how similar his sister resembles her mother too. The Greil Mercenaries emphasize this as a whole. From the actual trio of brothers to the overall ties everyone has, they're in this together. Everyone in the game, Greil states that no matter who they are or where they're from, that they're a family. It's a quote that Ike repeats just before the very end of this game, showing that even though he's passed, Greil's spirit lives on in the family he left behind. The Laguz treat one another as close as brethren, some more than others. The Hawks and Herons have a strong relationship, and the siblings of Serenus are integral to bringing back life to a forest long since destroyed. As mentioned earlier, it's these sibling sisters and Ike's mother who were able to bring the medallion away from evil's grasp. One of the most powerful and disturbing moments in this game is within the tower that houses several different Laguz warped by drugs and who knows what else. We aren't directly shown what's within, but it's vile enough that it unites all Laguz who witness it, even the Ravens of Kilvis, to rally against the King of Dayan in the name of their fallen family. And speaking of Laguz and Dayan, I would like to address Jill for a moment. It is rare in a Fire Emblem game that a single unit gets multiple moments of screen time throughout the course of the entire game like this, especially one that has no specific tie to the main group. She starts off ready to kill Laguz like it's a sport, raised in an environment where she was taught that they are nothing but filthy creatures. But under Ike's wing, she is forced to set her beliefs aside and see the world for herself. That deeply rooted hatred and racism begins to lift over the course of the game. Her interactions with Miss are particularly impactful to her, I would say. She gets approached by Har, her superior, and asks if she is sure she wants to continue like this because it'll mean facing her father sooner or later. As he puts it, she's begun to develop her own sets of morals and values. He's happy about that and doesn't try hard to persuade Jill when she decides to continue fighting against Dayan. But if you meet the right conditions, one of the craziest things that can happen in a Fire Emblem game takes place. If you have Jill speak to her father, you will see what I believe is the only instance of this entire series where an enemy who became an ally will revert back to the enemy side and become a red unit. From this point, she will fight beside her dad, and if you finish her off in battle, that's just it. It's the end of her story. The other Dayans will berate her, and yet despite her initial behavior, you can't help but feel conflicted. She was definitely wrong to start, but she learns the error of her ways while fighting her own internal battles. The format of this Fire Emblem just sets up so many possible layers of depth to so many characters like her. Soren's support with Ike will probably help you to understand why he's so bitter all the time. Sure, there's definitely moments where he's in the wrong and has his own moments of displaying prejudice, but he also begins to move on and open up about himself. He is one of the branded, one who is born from a Laguz and a Bjork parents, and fears that people like Ike, the only person he could ever truly trust, would leave him. But then Ike is like, nah, you're fine. It really just takes someone who will accept you for who you are. The interpersonal relationships were handled in such a wonderful way here. There's a lot of sweet and heartfelt moments that occur over the course of this story, sometimes lasting for just a single line of dialogue. It helps to make these characters feel so much more real and relatable. There is a lot of text compared to other Fire Emblems, but I feel that this game and world benefits from that. The world is so realized and lived in. There are hidden conversations between certain allies and enemies that will tell you so much with so little, or some that may not make any sense whatsoever as to why there's a conversation happening between these two in the first place. But nearly every single interaction in this game has a reason. From General Zelgius, who defends the Crimean army from the back, that freak Izuka who works with Dayan to unleash the Feral Ones, to just whatever the heck is going on with Sephiroth. He becomes the very last person Ike speaks with before addressing Elincia. As Ike leaves, he says some interesting words about how word of the mercenary who ended the war will spread, and that Ashnar's wish might have, in some way, still come true. Remember, this is the man who had nearly maxed out stats and was able to order the Black Knight to stand down with a single command. The time between this game and Radiant Dawn was wild with speculation in the circles that cared about it. The fact that the sequel was already written by this game's completion makes replaying Path of Radiance with a new set of eyes very interesting. To the point where maybe we'll have to discuss Radiant Dawn like this somewhere in the future. You just never know what might happen. You know, doing this made me realize even more so how much this game takes inspiration from Genealogy of the Holy War. It brought back skills, it takes a much stronger focus on the narrative and characters of the world. The base is pretty much an evolution of the castle portion. The 4-part chapter, Daybreaks, is basically the size of a Genealogy chapter. In the original, you couldn't save between every checkpoint, and every unit just continued from where they were left off. I feel that this game executed this long chapter format in a way that they ideally would have done it long ago. During conversations, you may see 2 simultaneous dialogue boxes on the top and bottom of the screen. They pretty much didn't have enough room to do this on the Game Boy Advance. Units in this game must reach level 20 before they can class up. This is the same in Path of Radiance, but now they'll automatically class change when they reach level 21 and don't need a seal like in previous games. There are a few seals to make use of if anyone is struggling, but most will have to go to their maximum level. And the music playing right now is a remix of a song from that game. You only ever hear it on the trial maps after you beat the game, but it is so cool to hear that here. And oh yeah, these side battles can also allow you to play as enemy units like Oliver. I held this back the whole time, but I just love how the Fire Emblem community and the devs themselves understand how much of a beautiful man he is. You can even play as Ashnard if you beat the game 15 times. It is way easier to unlock boss units in the previous game, Sacred Stones. Trying to do full playthroughs to get everyone is just a little too much, man. But speaking of, you can also link your GBA to this game. With a copy of Sacred Stones or Blazing Blade, you can also get character illustrations and extra trial maps. It doesn't work on NSO. So I was very surprised to see that they were already unlocked when I finished Path of Radiance. Very cool of them to not require an actual connection. Sadly, the list for Sacred Stones art is very small in comparison, partially because it was still in development at the same time as Path of Radiance, so not all the character art and assets were fully completed by the time that this game had released. We would have also been able to get unlockables for the Binding Blade, but we didn't get that localized. The content is there, but it's locked away. Even if it's just art, it would have been cool to see even just a glimpse into Roy's game. There's a handful of characters from the Blazing Blade too. I wonder if this would have helped to push the localization of this one. One final extra fun bit, if you start a new game, you can now equip little bands to your units. These increase the growth percentage of units when they level up, but just by a little bit. I'm talking like 5 or 10% increased chances at most. But it can certainly help. You can also choose to have fixed level ups. There is a whole formula for how this works, with each character having growth points combined with their growth rate, and the enemy that they defeat, and the weapon that they use. It's complicated. We don't have time to go into that right now. All you really need to know is that it alters growth rates so that your units will reach their average stats a little more often in this mode. Fun little extras aside, that is pretty much everything I wanted to say about Path of Radiance. It has such a nuanced focus on politics, something I usually don't care about, but it presents it in such a way that hooks us to these characters. The messages are relevant and can be applied to life today. The game doesn't expect me to get angry because of a demonic overlord that cursed my friends. Path of Radiance shows your friend getting bullied because they look different. Growing up, yeah, I've witnessed and have been a part of prejudiced situations. Everyone knew and grew up with stupid kids in school or somewhere. But these days, I witness even worse prejudice because those stupid kids are now stupid adults and the world sucks. We've all had a friend who's been made fun of or mocked because of who they are or what they look like or how they want to be perceived, and it resonates with me in this game. Some of your own team members are incredibly racist, and as much as this sucks to say, it's good to have them in your party, because it gives you that perspective. It gives you a reason to try and understand why this segregation exists. The Laguz despise the Bjork who burned down Serenus Forest, but both people try to move on. Several NPCs misinterpret what the Laguz are and outright curse them, like Shinon. Jill is one of the most fascinating characters in the game, if not just for her character development. For so many of these characters, there are very personal and intimate moments that are quite fleeting, but they impact the bonds that they have with each other so much. Path of Radiance and the sequel Radiant Dawn are among my favorite duology of games. The structure of Radiant Dawn has very mixed and divisive feelings, but the narrative and following the story of these characters over both games is an amazing journey. I'm also shocked at how many people I know who have played Radiant Dawn before Path of Radiance, or only played Radiant Dawn. You kind of need to know the story of this game before you play the sequel. But I guess that's expected when the Wii was so much more widely played than the GameCube. I have always dreamed of a modern remake that would get this title closer to the 100% completion that the developers originally envisioned. There's just so much potential here. And on top of that, nearly every single unit in this game has a voice thanks to Fire Emblem Heroes.
The commander gave us jobs, a place to sleep, food on our plates. He gave us our lives back.
I intend to live according to my own wishes, not those of my family. I want my life to be my own.
I am Tanith, Deputy Commander of the Benyon Empire's Holy Guard.
A single arrow right between the eyes? Who else could make a shot like that?
You really do know how to sweet-talk a girl, don't you? You know, I think I'll keep you. Yes, I do think you'll make a grand souvenir.
I need to see things for myself to truly understand them. I can't let my beliefs be shaped by the opinions of others.
I'm interested in Gallia's beast tribes. Fascinated, really. Can we go somewhere and talk?
If I could save just one ally, it would mean so much to me.
I had the honor to serve under Greil, Ike's father. Ike's not a bad person by any means, but he has no manners whatsoever.
Perish! Kill me! Tell the barkeep you've need of a fireman. You'll see me within an hour.
My name is Ileana. I'm a traveling mage.
We are family. If you don't want to cause your family any grief, then live.
For receiving my own royal assistance, let's see, triple rates.
Despise me. Let your hate build and attack me with everything you have. Only those with power will be allowed to live. Hurry and die, weakling!
Curious as to who I am. You're better off not knowing. Or perhaps even asking.
When this title was released, the popularity of the series was still relatively high. It gradually decreased in the years that followed, but I always thought that with a re-release, it would have hit the audiences who love games like Awakening and Three Houses very strongly. I hope this game resonates with you, as well as it did with me. And that, as they say, is that. Thank you so much for getting this far and listening to me break down one of the all-time greats. While I enjoyed the Blazing Blade and Sacred Stones, it was Path of Radiance that really captured me and made me a fan of this series for life. It's always interesting to look back on this, because I end up thinking about the story more so than playing the game. My mind finds its cozy place when I'm organizing my units. I still very vividly remember those rainy nights, bundled up in my living room, wrapped in a blanket and taking my sweet time at a base. I talked with friends, got to know them, optimized their equipment, and took part of an epic adventure. And not even halfway through this game, I remember telling myself, man, I think this is now one of my favorite games ever. I hope it never ends. And in some ways, it never has. The fans continue to keep the series alive, and I can now watch a whole new generation of people discover Ike and the Greil Mercenaries. So let me know if you're a longtime fan or have recently set off on this path for the very first time. I would love to see this become one of your favorite games in the series. But that's enough from me. If you'd like to watch one of my shorter, less serious peeks back into other GameCube titles, I'll leave one right at the end of this video. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Till we meet again.